Well, welcome to another episode of FVTV, and we have with us our Grand Master Richard Elkington. Welcome to your interview.
Thank you, Ash, and it's always a great opportunity to not only talk to you, but of course talk to the members right across our great state.
Yeah, well, you've been around our great state quite a bit by Zoom. What have you been doing? Where have you been going?
I have indeed. I can get to sort of Mildura to Malakuta in one day.
What's happening at the meetings? What are the ideas that are being spoken about?
Terrific ideas. In fact, there's one idea manifested itself in this week's FV News and Engage, where we talked about the use of LMRs. Now came about.
That's Lodge meeting reports.
Lodge meeting reports and returns. That explanation came about as a result of a question I was asked at a Lodge meeting maybe a month ago, where not unsurprisingly, a senior member said, why are we producing these LMRs? Is it just another form that goes into the centre and ends up in a pile in someone's in tray? Or do you actually make use of these things? Which is a very reasonable question, actually. And so I thought, well, let's get an answer for that. So the office produced an answer, and they went through it in detail in as to what we do with them. And now they've produced a series of videos on how important LMRs are.
And Graham Berry's done an excellent job, hasn't he?
He's done a terrific job. Yep, absolutely.
He's put together 9 different videos, each under 2 minutes. Each explains what they are. But a Lodge secretary puts together an LMR each month. Records who was there, who was absent, so that we can track how healthy the Lodge is, so that we can see who might have died, who might have joined, who might have put in a resignation.
Exactly right.
So it can all be acted upon. And I think we're getting better at it.
Absolutely are. We're getting better at it. And as you know, anybody who's seen those videos or watched an explanation is that they're absolutely vital to the future of this organisation. They're used by our volunteer action teams. The statistics are. So we rely very much on the stats that come out of Lodge meeting reports to actually run our organisation more effectively.
Yeah, Richard, it's always been a case of theory that if someone resigned, they would get a phone call from Grand Lodge. It hadn't always happened in the past, but I think the membership VAT now, the Volunteer Action Team for members, is looking to actually contact people if they put in their resignation, to have a chat and say, are there things that we might be able to fix or do better that might persuade you to continue your membership?
I know that they've engaged in discussions with all of the members who resigned earlier this year, and they've been able to demonstrate really to those resigned members that things have changed, are changing, every member is important. Please come back and join our fraternity and share in those sorts of experiences that cause you to want to join the institution in the first place, because it is a great institution, doing great stuff. Please be part of it once again.
Richard, some of the lodges, especially around rural and regional Victoria, are having a struggle.
They are indeed.
What's the situation? How can they be assisted?
Well, I think they can be assisted in a number of ways. I think we can show them how to, or assist them to engage with their own communities. Many of them are sort of crying out for help. How do I engage with the local media? We're doing stuff, but it doesn't seem to be recognised. How can we support the relevance of our institution at local level? So what can we do from the centre, from Grand Lodge or the Secretariat, to actually help them in marketing their lodge? How can we help them to plan? And so it's really about doing all we can to focus on the lodge and individual members so they continue to share that great experience, which they've been doing for a long time. And you're quite right, some of them are in a perilous state. We're a bit of a mixed bag in Freemasonry, actually. We have some really strong lodges, particularly in city areas, and we have some community-based lodges in rural Victoria in particular.
They're a treat to visit, aren't they?
Oh, they're fantastic to visit. Yeah. I was going to say they're genuine Freemasons, but I think you know what I mean. They live for it.
You will never forget the welcome that you get at a country lodge meeting.
Absolutely. Well, I've spent most of my life, all of my Masonic life, in a country lodge, and we do things differently than they do in Melbourne. We have our own ritual. I think you know what I mean. We have our own practices, but we tend to be in small numbers, and there's long distances between lodges to support each other.
Yeah. Richard,
and so we just need to improve the experience in lodge.
Richard, you spoke of valuing every member, and we lost a very important member of Freemasonry this week, whose voice would have been familiar to many, but whose face was also familiar. And I speak of David Mcgee, known through his 3AW radio connections. He was a presenter for decades and also in the management role, but also a very prominent Freemason.
Absolutely. I knew David as the Grand Master of Grand Mark somewhere about the middle 1980s.
Yes.
So he'd been around for a long time, was Grand Master at a comparatively young age, actually. Had a absolutely fabulous speaking voice.
Beautiful.
And ritual presentation voice. I also knew him in his capacity as, I guess you'd call it fundraising manager with the Eye and Ear Hospital. So I've met him in both capacities. He was a really great guy, very supportive of newer members of the team. Again, I thought a great Masonic leader. He will be sadly missed by everyone who knew him.
Yes, he will.
And you, of course, worked with him yourself, didn't you?
Yes, I did indeed. And David was a good character. He was predictable in terms of the values. You knew what his answer would be because it would be the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
And he will be very much missed. A great ambassador to Freemasonry.
Isn't that called wisdom, Ash?
I haven't learnt that part yet, Richard. It's a journey. It's a person. I'm very much a rough ashler. Richard, I want us to now take a bit of a different tack. I want us to imagine that our viewer at the moment is someone who perhaps wants to join Freemasonry, or someone who's just become an entered apprentice. So they are yet to know the intricacies of our organisation. I've got a very simple question. Who's the boss?
That's a terrific question. It's one of the first questions I was asked when I became president of the board back in, I think it was 2016. There are a number of layers of this. If I use a political analogy, and that sometimes is the easiest way to explain this, the Grand Master is like the governor with a whole host of reserve powers, never intended to be used. So I'm over and above, if you like, the Grand Lodge in that sort of sense.
So that means you as a person, should you decide to, after advice and contemplation, you could veto something.
I can. I've got the power of veto. It's actually written into the Constitution.
Right.
Not intended ever to be used, but it's a reserve power.
Sure.
And so I'm the spokesperson for the organisation. I'm the ceremonial leader. However, the government of the craft is in fact vested in the president of the board of general purposes.
Right, and that's Miles King.
So he's analogous. If I'm analogous to the governor, Miles King is analogous to the premier.
Okay.
And so he's the premier of the organisation, leading a group of ministers who are on the board. That's the ministers.
Yeah, sure. So we also then have a Grand Secretary.
We do. The Grand Secretary is
Gary Runge.
He's like the ceremonial and administrative head of the organisation. Okay? And so he and the CEO, and that's another issue we'll be debating in the coming weeks as to whether we continue with a chief executive role and where. That's akin to the head of a government department, if you like. So the head of Premier and Cabinet would be the CEO / Grand Secretary. So they provide that's the operational arm of government. So you've got myself as the governor, the ministers, and the Premier as the board of general purposes, and the president. And then you've got the administrative arm, which is the CEO / Grant Secretary.
Okay. Now, we've had someone rejoin us who has helped us in the past, and I guess we might call him a navigator, and that's Jeremy Cattell. And Jeremy has joined us with a special purpose to help us. If governments can have roadmaps, so can we. So he's helping prepare a roadmap. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct, Ash. Jeremy was retained as the interim chief executive because it was no secret to anyone in Victoria that there was some disharmony in our organisation. Earlier this year, we believed we needed some strong management support to re-examine the strategic plan, to help us with a governance review, and to assist us in a number of particular management areas that required to be examined. So he's come on board to actually do that in the capacity of interim chief executive. So it's really about adding to the management grunt of our organisation.
Okay, so we're re-examining our strategic plan. So
we are. We're doing that commencing this weekend.
So COVID-19 gives us an opportunity to just pause for a moment. We're on the top of the plateau and we're looking around saying, where do we go next and how do we get there?
Absolutely correct. We would have preferred to have done this face-to-face as a board, but COVID-19 means we can't. So we're doing as much as we can, like everyone else is, using the Zoom platform.
So while we're doing all of this, we've got a behavioural committee and we've also got an ethics review. Now, they're both in progress.
In fact, ethics, the behavioural review, the Masonic Behavioural Committee, has produced its interim report that's been considered by the board, and there's some engagement with that behaviour committee coming up soon. That's really looked at what are the fundamental issues with member behaviour and what can we do as an organisation to actually help to improve member behaviour, Masonic etiquette, if you like. What can we do about that, improving it? The ethics review, you and I have spoken about this a number of times.
Yes.
The ethics review really is not like the reviews we've done in the past. We've done lots of organisational reviews where we've looked at the org structure and who does what within that and who relates to what. This is more about putting a stake in the ground. It's an act of due diligence. It's actually saying what policies and protocols and practices does Freemasons Victoria have, and how does it comply with those particular
I guess we have to realise that we're an organisation with perhaps, well, certainly more than 100 buildings around the state. I don't know what the number is.
I think it's about 140.
So if you added it all up, in real estate alone, we're probably $100 million plus.
We are indeed. We are a large business. We're a large business. I think the members need to know, need to be given assurance, as do you and I, quite frankly, that this organisation is being managed and led and governed effectively. There's some concern about whether we are or not. This is a once in a lifetime or once in a generation opportunity to establish what are the gaps and how can we overcome them. What sort of culture do we have as an organisation, which leads to some of the failures, some of the gaps in compliance. So
well, I guess there's also the acknowledgement, Richard, that it is a multi-million dollar organisation, not only in buildings, but in the investments that Freemasons Victoria has.
Yes.
Its body, Freemasons Foundation, which is a quite separate entity, has a corpus of something like $50 million or more.
And we make some major spends. I mean, Bayside costs between 20 and I'm terrible in detail, but between 20 and $30 million. The whole project at Eastbourne cost. We had to take out a loan of something of the order of $300 million. We've now got an asset back to us that is significant. Plus, we were able to bank something of the order of $50 million as a consequence of that. So we're not playing with, chicken feed. Yeah. We're managing real assets. We have investments, significant investments.
Now, when we have a thing like an ethics committee review and we engage professionals to assist us. What does something like that cost?
Well, it's a very good question, actually. It's of the order of $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I like the fact that it's costing $100,000? You betcha. I wish I could get it for half.
Yeah.
But I would expect that with improvements in our processes, with greater attention to compliance, not only with internal policies, but the regulator, the compliance rules of the regulators, that we'll be able to recover that spend within a year. That's my expectation. In fact, I'm happy to report on that to the membership. And so,
I'm just doing some rough figures in my head.
Yeah.
If we've got 8,000 members, that works out about $12.50 per member.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to pay an additional $12.50. This is
certainly not.
This is included in what they already pay. This is a
correct.
budgeted expense.
This is coming out of a strategic part of our general fund. So it's not requiring any additional fees. It's something that's actually coming out of an allocation that's already been made. And,
so this is part of our roadmap. Our roadmap. Government has one. We've got one, and we're hopefully building a better one.
Absolutely, as you know yourself, running a major business, Ash. Often, when new owners take over or new managers, the first thing they do is to get a status report from an independent consultant on what the state of the business is. This is no different. It's exactly the same.
So we're building our new roadmap, and I guess over this coming weekend, the state government's going to make some announcements of us getting closer to perhaps recovery. What's your viewpoint of where Freemasonry is going to land in a few months' time?
Well, I hope we get back to meeting face-to-face as soon as we can.
Yeah, it'll be magnificent.
Sure, I'm meeting hundreds of Freemasons a week and I'm enjoying it. Getting lots of ideas. Lots of young people are full of enthusiasm, I'm seeing. But nothing would beat us meeting together. I know in South Australia they've been meeting now for some weeks. They've devised rituals for first, second, third degrees and installation. We're endeavouring to source from other jurisdictions how they're operating in a ceremonial sense. So we would hope that from early in the new year, we can actually start doing some ceremonial work. So I know there's a bit of enthusiasm out there, would you believe, Ash,
yes,
for doing some work in quarries, doing some work externally, outside, because of course the risk of transmission is much lower. So
yeah.
There's some enthusiasm, so much enthusiasm. People would actually like to go back and meet on the quarry this weekend. So would I.
That's terrific. Richard, thanks for joining us. We've probably taken longer than we might have thought best, but we've covered so much.
It only felt like a couple of minutes.
We've covered a lot of areas. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for reporting in such an open way to our membership.
Thank you.
We'll be back in another fortnight.
We hope so.
With a similar chat.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Richard.
Ta-da.